Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sound on Siren podcast. I'm your co-host, Imbali Blooming.
And I'm Adonis Critter King.
Awesome. So, folks, please, okay? You know how this goes. You're listening to a podcast, you're watching a YouTube channel, certain things that you got to do if you fucks with it. If you're liking what we do, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a review us, leave us a little cute little comment. You know, they care about the star ratings, they care about all this stuff, but we just care with connecting to you. You know what I'm saying? And if you're watching us on YouTube, come on, just scroll your mouse over, do a little clickety-click, subscribe to the channel, you know, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and on TikTok at Sound on Siren Pod or Podcast. Okay, now that the introduction is over,
yes,
how are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling just like ready, doing it, feeling good.
I love it.
How are you?
I'm doing great. And this time when the podcast comes out, I will have released my EP, and I will have also
Well, shut up.
my show performance. The first time we recorded this, the shock was real.
I like half committed. I was like, maybe that's weird. I know about this. Oh.
Hilarious, but I feel really stoked. Being able to just bring something that literally came from like nothing. There was no words, there was no this concept, there was no this song, you know, before there was this song. So and now this full project and this full EP. And I think one thing that I really love about it is that I get to bring my family along for the ride, you know. One of my cousins, we use a lot of his beats, reworked and stuff like that by Josh. My niece's voice is on there, my family members' voices are on there, my friends' voices are on there. Like, it's just such a beautiful project and so many bodies to account for, and you know, it being a body of work itself, but also there being so many bodies to account for. It's been really spiritual. It's been a very spiritual experience.
Wow.
And I'm excited. So listen to Oratilwe, Oratilwe, and enjoy the EP.
Yeah.
Sweet. So today, we are going to be talking about particular countries that you want to visit as our intro game here. We're going to talk about the top 3 countries that you want to visit, and then the top 3 countries that you want to live in. And this will inform the main topic of the podcast in a little bit. But after seeing my analytics of like Spotify and who's listening to what and where they are, I'm very curious, like, ooh, where do I do a tour? Where do I do a show? Like, this actually opens up the avenue for me that I've always wanted to do, to travel and be an international person.
Amazing. Okay, so what are the top 3 places you want to visit?
So the top 3 countries that I want to visit, Ghana. Definitely Ghana. Mozambique. I want to visit Mozambique. I want to see the culture. I want to go to the tropical side of things. Like, I want a balance of resort and like lived experience in Mozambique. And I would be going to live in Ghana. I'd be going to visit in Ghana. And then visit in Mozambique. And then my third one would still be Bali. Yeah, especially since my friend was in Bali and I actually got to see some parts of it, like virtually. I want to go to Bali.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to go to Bali for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, those would be my 3.
Those are great 3.
What about you?
Honestly, I really want to go to Korea and to Seoul and just to explore both the city and like the countrysides and the beaches. I'd love to go to Sierra Leone. So my dad is from, and he said I can't go back till he goes back.
Okay.
And he hasn't been back, so I've been waiting my whole life.
Why can't you go back?
He just hasn't. Like, he left when he was 17, and he hasn't been back since.
So why can't you go back?
Because he says I have to wait till he does.
Oh.
And I'm just being nice, I guess.
And doing it, yeah.
So.
Have you asked him why?
He has been like timing. Time.
I mean, it's probably a whole bunch of other things as well. Yeah. Fair.
He's got family there he could stay with. I'm like, ugh, hurry up. But that's okay. And then I'm like Fiji, Bali, Thailand. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dope.
I've got a lot of places I want to go.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Dope. Okay, what are the top 3 countries you would live in then? And let's say live in for an extended period of time. We'll say like a year, maybe even a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That gets complicated, I feel, for like trans rights, gay rights. But if we're doing like a year, that is like more thinkable than like 10 years the rest of my life. So where would I want to live? Oh, it's so tough. Okay, where would I want to live for a year? I would want to live... I could do America for a year.
Okay.
Even though it's like a wild place. I'm like, I'd love to go to New York. I'd love to see, like, live in LA for a little bit. I'd love to live in like New Orleans somewhere. But the politics are a lot. So I'm like, always like, but I think those would be lovely.
Okay.
Or Atlanta. I'd love to visit Atlanta as well. Where else do I want to live for a year? I'm like, what am I doing there? Am I like living? Am I like making art? Am I like investing in community? Like, what are we up to? Let's say I live in Jamaica for a year.
Okay.
Just to, yes, I live in Jamaica for a little bit. I'm also Jamaican. And where else would I live? I think I would live in Thailand for a year.
Fair.
Yeah.
Dope. Yeah. I feel your sentiments with America. It's like the culture of America, the people of America. Yes, absolutely. Jump me right in. The container of America.
Yikes.
Second, third, fourth, 5, 16,000 thoughts. You know what I'm saying? But dope. Where would I live? I don't know. I kind of feel like I would do well in Nigeria. I don't know why. For a year and a half, you know? Probably living in Abuja. Probably living in Abuja and then doing creative things. So going for my creativity. I'd live in Nairobi, in Kenya. I feel like Costa Rica.
Ooh.
Yeah, Costa Rica. I was supposed to go to Costa Rica in 2020, just before the pandemic began.
Right.
And we were in lockdown. I think BC declared lockdown. 2 days or 1 day before we were supposed to fly out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was going to be my first vacation ever in my of like my own vacation.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was...
I'm so sorry.
That's
heartbreaking.
All right. That's all right. It was, it was very heartbreaking. But those would be the top 3 that I would live in. Right now, given what I want to do and who I am and how I'd like to explore.
Gorge.
Yeah. But when I was younger, I used to want to go to Europe so badly. I was like, I want to go to Europe. I want to live in London, all this stuff, which I still do. I think I would more readily live on the African continent than in Europe. But not to say that I would never live in Europe.
Yes.
You know, that'd be a place that I would like to go and visit, do shows and stuff like that. I'm noticing with my analytics and my music that there's a lot of people in the different European cities who are listening to my music and who like it. And so I was like, okay, you know, maybe there's an audience there. So like, I fucks with y'all. Don't get me wrong. But I think as I've grown up and I've moved to the West and I'm now living in Canada, I realized that it really ain't giving. It's really not giving. And it's even beyond giving. Like it's just it's just like, not only is it this fantasy, but I think that we were sold the fantasy as fantastical. You know what I'm saying? Like it had an added sprinkle of something. Like it was this so it was this fantasy, but it's also fantastical. But it's like, no, it's fantasy because it's fiction. It's fantasy because it is a fantasy for a lot of people that live in the West to live this dream, this illusion, you know, that they're selling and doing in the movies and shows and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, it's not like that.
Yeah.
And it's not like that because you're also not coming from that place, you know? And I was always like, oh yeah, I want to go to America. I want to go to these places. But I find I actually don't. I actually don't. I just want to go be able to freely travel and live on the continent. And I want the continent to be healthy. And I want it to be left the fuck alone so we can do what we need to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like I've that is now my dream and my wish for me, you know, because I was born in South Africa. And I've always been curious, you know, now that I've kind of had what I've come to learn and research is called the hero's journey. Now that I'm kind of in that hero's journey, which is longing for home because realizes that home is sweeter than here in the sweetness and the sourness that you're willing to take and accommodate, that I'm, so, you know, started learning a lot more about Africa, started learning a lot more about Pan-Africanism, and kind of this feeling and experience that I was having was very much in line with this idea of Pan-Africanism. So I think in episode 2 of this podcast, or episode 1, I spoke about Pan-Africanism in depth, but Pan-Africanism, do you know what Pan-Africanism is?
No, you tell me.
So Pan-Africanism is this understanding, kind of belief, consciousness that is centered around 2 key principles. So the first principle is called is called Black consciousness or Black identity, and it's this ideology or this approach that there is a Black identity. There is an identity of Black people, which subsumes the culture, the traditions, but that Black people have a different way of thinking and perceiving the world in terms of how it's a lot more together. It's a lot less separated, the way that we think about things. There's not a lot of different categories as such, and that we have our own foundations and principles in the same way that the Europeans, as they were traveling all around, and other folks that were traveling all around, would try to instill their principles and their beliefs into, you know, Black people, to shift the way that we even see family relationships, the way we see our own spirituality, the way we see our own land, the way we see each other, you know, whereas Pan-Africanism talks about pan, so like whole African. It's like there is an African identity. There's an identity that African people hold. There's a particular philosophy. And when you tap into that philosophy, you kind of tap back into Black consciousness, or the consciousness of your Blackness, and what that could look like, which is varied, but in the writings around Pan-Africanism, at the very least, the early writings around it, they weren't really accounting for too much of the segmentations or the diversity in speaking about it. And I don't know if that is just because they knew it to be fact and so don't need to write about it. But what I'm coming across here is that they don't need to write about it. Awesome. So that's one. The second one is, again, in this idea of Pan-Africanism, of like uniting African systems. So whether that's the economy, the market, trading, all of that kind of stuff, where it's not meant to be self-sufficient or self-reliant, because when we're thinking about Pan-Africanism, it's not against something else in the way that it came up, in the way that it was advocated for, had to be against colonization, right? But in its theory, in its essence, it's not based on being against, it's based on really knowing yourself and understanding yourself and honing yourself. And so even in that honing and understanding is, you know, building a trading system or a market where we hone and we understand the resources that we have on the continent, how they're valuable, but also how we can trade amongst each other, how we can refine, how we can do all this kind of stuff where we kind of have a unity, almost like the US has their unity, we'll have kind of our own unity of sorts in these different measures and different ways. So that's kind of what Pan-Africanism talks about.
Okay, awesome. So in that first part, is there differentiation between Black and African in Pan-Africanism?
I don't think so, because in the writings they have so Pan-Africanism began outside Africa. Pan-Africanism was founded by folks in the diaspora, and then it was later kind of almost like the torch was handed back to the African continent to actually then pursue even further these ideas of an African Union, a market, financial, economic, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So it started out of the continent and then came back into the continent and started by folks in the diaspora with all of the,
Okay, interesting. Cool.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting concept. And so as I'm thinking now, getting older and like figuring out what I want to do, where I want my music to go, but also just how much I can like try to live somewhere and anywhere, to be and do what I want to do. I met a lady like a few weeks ago, maybe like a couple months ago now, but she's an archivist and she does work in Toronto. We were talking about the Black identity, and I was, talking to her about how I wanted to interview folks about Pan-Africanism in their different roles. So, people that are in the West here, in their different capacities, whether it's journalists, musicians, other people in community, whatever the case might be, around what their idea on Pan-African or their take on Pan-Africanism is, and how they're being a Pan-Africanist, right? How are they fulfilling that Pan-Africanism? And she said, obviously it's a dope concept and topic, and also to account for the fact that everybody's most closest tie to like whatever their home is, wherever they come from, is not directly Africa for all Black people. And it got me thinking about if there's a difference between Pan-Africanism and Afrocentrism, because so this definition says here, Pan-Africanism is the principle or advocacy of the political union of all indigenous inhabitants of Africa. And then there's another one which says that Pan-Africanism is the movement that aims to encourage and strengthen bonds of solidarity between all indigenous peoples and diasporas of African ancestry. And so this is why I'm talking about the Black consciousness, this Black identity, which they talk about, is to say everybody is subsumed in the Black identity because it's not a geographical thing. This is who we are as a people that are the same. And so as the people that are the same, we should all then have kind of we should divest and then invest in the African Union. And maybe that doesn't necessarily mean moving back to Africa. Maybe that might just mean whatever business you do, whatever it is that you're doing, that is your focus, that in some way you're contributing back to the African continent so that it can grow and become a union in whichever ways it needs to, right? Because we know that a really good way to support a country is through economy. A really good way to support a continent is through economy, right? The markets and stuff like that. And even the people that are in there, how do we establish institutions that are working really well for us? I think for me, that's a very Pan-Africanist thing. Whereas Afrocentrism is to say, well, I'm going to get a BBL, for example, or like I'm going to get, lip injections, for example. That would kind of be a take on. And so this is why I'm saying, again, Pan-Africanism maybe it's not completely monoracial, but like does really feel as though it is it puts the impetus, but also the sense of belonging and purpose in a Black person to say, if there's a place that you want to cultivate and work, this is the place to come and cultivate and work, because this place houses and holds you in that capacity of that very connection.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so since you mentioned that it was like created in the diaspora and brought back to Africa. Being from South Africa, does that feel like true? Like, is that something that like the people of the continent are like, yes, come back here, like let's embrace Pan-Africanism? Or does that feel like a diaspora dream that isn't practical or wanted?
I think it's a dream on either end. I think it just depends on what folks have been exposed to, you know. There's obviously going to be the different relationships between African Americans and Africans, you know, folks who know in Africa where they're from, and then folks who know where they're from, which is, you know, off the African continent, and that because of society and because of colonialism and white supremacy being pitted against each other, I think that really becomes the place where we have that breakdown, is when we start to look at our experiences as a competitive thing versus a difference that can actually build and help and support. And so I think living in South Africa, a lot of my ambitions were to leave South Africa because of what I had been globalized to, because of what globalization does, right? Yeah. It makes you focus on the globe, but also the particular globe, which is America or Canada or the UK or, you know, Europe. Yeah. And so that's where my ambitions were. Yes, definitely still doing what I got to do for my community, you know, and living that life, that all of those experiences, but I always wanted to leave. And now that I've left, I realize I want to go back. Yeah. I want to go back, you know, and a lot of us, I've spoken to a lot of Black people that are here in Canada, especially in Vancouver, and, you know, most people say that their hope is to go home one day, and they're here to get something, one thing or another. They're here to get something, whether that's money, skill, whether that's a break, but it's not a long term. But there's a handful of people also that are like, they're never going back to the continent. They don't feel like there's anything there for them. And so I think there's a balance depending on your circumstance, depending on your experience. I mean, there's also a lot of upheaval, tension, conflict, you know, between folks from different countries. You know, the xenophobia is a really big thing in South Africa. And so, and again, obviously majorly constructed to divide us and to focus on, you're not from my country, you're not from my country, all this kind of stuff. Even though there are regular human things that are happening that are wrong, it's made to seem like you're doing this and it's worse because you're from another country. Whereas it's like, you're doing this and it's horrible because you're human and you're doing it to another human, right? So that patriotism kind of gets under our skin. But to be patriotic really is a Western idea, you know, and is centered around this little space. Whereas we didn't have these guardrails and these lines, you know, we didn't have patriotism. You might have had pride in who you were, the people that you come from, but we weren't patriotic necessarily. So yeah, kind of a jumble of who desires it, who wants it, and what are we willing to do to get it. Do
you identify as a Pan-Africanist?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
To know, even though I was born in Africa, is to know that I am, whether I want to or not, whether I like these other people or not, am connected to all Black people. I'm connected to all humans, 100%. But to me, there's that, it's like if we draw those circles, you know, there's like an inside circle. And that's where the Pan-Africanism sits to me. It's like inside the humanity sphere is this area of like being a Black person, but also being connected to all Black people. And for us to I truly do believe that we hold something that is special, you know, something that is really, really special. And that special is not in comparison to, it's not against, it's not for, it doesn't have to do with anybody else. I think that's what Pan-Africanism has taught me and kind of manifests as for me, is that my identity as a Black person or loving another Black person doesn't have to be as a revolutionary act against something all the time, you know, because we had that love in its conflict, in its rage, in its wars, and all of this, but we had that on our own already. You know, we have the human shit that happens. We have the conflicts, the wars, all this stuff. Yes, everybody has that, but we also had this love for each other that was not based on now we need to work against this idea of being Eurocentric or white people, or it was not about them. So for me, it removes that white gaze. It almost like alleviates it a little bit. It's like that doesn't have to be the center of my world. Is how do I get out of being in the Western view? Is really like, oh, there is an African view that is there. It lives there. And I know it, absolutely, you know. And how do I reclaim it is to focus on it as my center point. Yeah. To send the humanity of it is really, 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 really giving me this like oomph on like the humanity of a fellow Black person and Black people in general, and our livelihoods here, there, and on the continent. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, just really gives me, I don't know, just such a connectedness, such a groundedness. And I think also gives me a intellectual and academic way to conceptualize the possibility of an African Union, you know? So that makes me wonder, given that not every Black person's home in this direct sense is Africa, and not everybody feels tied and connected to Africa, then if Eurocentrism doesn't work for you and Afrocentrism doesn't work for you, then what does? Then what is it? Like, are there other options outside of being Eurocentric and Afrocentric? And is Pan-Africanism relevant to everyone? And I'm going to ask you as my first person, because you are Jamaican, like you said, haven't been to Africa because you're going to go to Sierra Leone, so you're waiting for your father. But yeah, is Pan-Africanism relevant to you in your life? And are you Afrocentric?
Such a good question. I do think I'm definitely Afrocentric in the ways that Black people, Black everything, Black ways of being come first, rooted in it for me, how I was raised, how I live, how I move, and how I want to exude into the world is the goal. So definitely Afrocentric. Pan-Africanism is it's an interesting, I don't know. I feel like my father has dreams of Afrocentrism, of Pan-Africanism for sure. And just like wants the wealth of the continents to be the wealth of the continents and to be able to like heal what has been hurt through colonialism. And I think that is something that's very important. And I feel like having not been raised there, being a part of like the African diaspora in a way, I'm like, I would feel strange to like come back and be like, okay, like here's what we have to do to fix it, you know? Like I'm like, that's not my role in that story. Yeah. And so there's a question of like, what is my role then? And like because I think that is an important thing to work towards, but it's feel like, it's not my story. Definitely a part of responsibility, but not like I can be the leader in this, you know?
Yeah.
But I do think that in some of the other offers in like Pan-Africanism is like Afrocentrism, but also like different cultures have been created. And like Africa itself has different cultures, obviously. Yeah. But then like Black America has its own culture. Black Canadians have their own culture. Like Black people of the diaspora in different places have like created their own culture. And so I feel like the other options are just like investing in your culture and like what is your culture, and like a new culture has been created. And so you don't have to be Eurocentric Pan-Africanist to focus on your culture, knowing that your culture's roots go back to Africa. And so I think it's important to like be connected to Africa, you know, or like the knowledge and like history and like things like art and music. And like, I think it's important to know, but also being able to nurture your own culture as well is really important.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially in like, I'll say the colonies like America and like Canada, where like everything is working so hard to stomp the culture out, it is important to like keep the roots and to keep all of those elements alive, because it will be devoured if possible. So I don't know if that makes me a Pan-Africanist or not, but I am an Afrocentrist and like Black consciousness and like the universal connection of all Black people and the kinship if they choose to tap into it, because not all skin folk are kinfolk.
Amen.
But I think that's where I sit in it.
Okay.
And so I need to like know more for myself what is like wanted, what I have to offer, what can be given. Yes.
Yeah. And I think I feel your almost like trepidatiousness of being a front runner or forerunner or being the pioneer of like some Pan-Africanist thing. And I think that it's definitely even something that on the continent, and these conversations about Pan-Africanism have been happening a very long time. There's a Pan-Africanist conference that happens every year, if not more than one. And the conversations are largely about no longer what is Pan-Africanism, because I think everybody's kind of, you can choose which Pan-Africanism you want. If you read the history of Pan-Africanism, you kind of understand what I mean. But I think the biggest thing is that right now, a setback for us not being Pan-Africanist in that way of like unifying Africa is our political leaders, and obviously the influence from the West, planting, assassinating, thwarting literally every single plan. Every time there is a political leader that is like for the people, for revolution, is anti-America, is anti, influence, is anti, selling the souls of Africa, is anti-pillaging and plundering the actual resources in that country. They kill them because we've invested way too much. We are stealing way too much to have you change and really empower the people, not only in your speech of empowering the people, but actually being able to put in policies. And I think this is the thing. Like a lot of people will think, oh, well, why, do Africans not stand up? Why is that? They are. We are. But there's only so much when the shift needs to be a political governmental shift that you can do, because even if the new president comes into power, you and me are not changing the policies. We might be voting for the policies, but there has to be a policy to vote for, and who's lobbying for that? It's not us. It's not us. And so it's important to know that, like, it's not that people are not doing anything. It's that the thing that needs to change the most at this point in time is this dynamic that we have to politics, to governance, and to the political figures that are in play. And for the US, for Canada, for China, for Europe, for everybody to leave us the fuck alone for a minute and a moment and just fuck off. Like, fuck off. Because I don't think that there's anyone who is coming in, any foreign investment that's coming in that is purely for the good and the benefit of Africa. I don't think so. It's people who have found whatever works for them. You might not be the biggest devil, but you sure are a devil. You sure are a devil, because it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, where you're from. It's not the case. Some people will be like, well, when, the China comes in or whatever, we have good relationships with Africans. We have good relationships with this. We helped here. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But like, if you're still taking advantage of us, if in the factories that you are creating and that you are building, there is still mistreatment, there's still underpaying, there's still abuse, there's still using, you're exactly the same. You're exactly the same. Exactly the same. So get the fuck out. Stop planting people. Stop. And also these political figures, grow the fuck up. Like, most seriously, like, time to get your bag is over. Time to get your bag is over. People are literally dying. Literally dying. Like, what's happening in the Congo right now is crazy to me. It's crazy to me, you know? And I love it. I love absolutely what South Africa is doing for Palestine. Absolutely. That is 100% necessary. And also to do for Sudan, to also do for Congo, to also do for Haiti. Like, we need to be looking at everybody as requiring and needing the help, the upliftment, but also just the visceral risk of risking, because it's a huge risk to do what all of these countries are doing in the grand scheme of sharing the pie. It's a huge risk to go against, you know who I'm talking about, capital I, you know. So I don't want YouTube. I don't know if there's censorship on YouTube, but you
Probably,
know,
yeah.
capital I, you know who I'm talking about. To go against that head honcho, because now we're realizing what a head honcho actually is. I think our parents might have known. People that are invested in kind of that sphere of the world and of life and current affairs might know. But I didn't know they were that much of a head honcho. They're a head honcho and they don't give a shit. So to go against them is a huge risk. It's a huge risk. But to let them do what they're doing is an even bigger risk for humanity. An even bigger risk for humanity. But we mustn't forget that, like, it's not just Palestine. It's not just Gaza. Yes, what they're going through is a genocide, and it is absolutely horrendous and must be ceasefire now. There's no seize the day, ceasefire now. And there's so many other people, and I just wish that we, as South Africa, who everyone's like, I'm so proud to be South Africa, I'm so proud. I'm also proud, but Naledi Pando, let's go. Let's stand up for everybody else. Let's stand up for Congo. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's my take on it. I actually don't know how I got here, but that's my take on it.
It's a powerful take. Yeah, and I feel like even that is like something that's visible on like social media that people don't really post about Congo and don't post about Sudan. And I think that there's two of us like feeling sometimes that we can only focus on like one thing. And when that happens, like Black people will never be the one thing focused on.
Yeah.
And so it's like how to hold and like support all of these things at once.
Yeah.
And to uplift your own people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I don't know if, I'm still very curious, obviously, and we're going to do hopefully a longer series of like Pan-Africanism and Afrocentrism and like moving forward, because as we build these, you know, liberated worlds and futures and we're dreaming, for me, it's important to, I'm very curious to see, because this is something that, you know, can be seen as a generational ideology, philosophy that's being passed on, you know, is this idea of Pan-Africanism and Afrocentrism. Is like, so how do we live it? Do we live them? Are there other options? Are there other alternatives? Like, when we're thinking about forward, when we're thinking about outside of this box of colonialism and white supremacy, what are the tools that we can use, and how do we use them? How do we live them? Are we living them? Are they pertinent to us? Do we need to create a whole other, you know, subsect? Does there need to be more dialogue and more literature about these other options, you know? Because like, I Googled what outside of Afrocentric and Eurocentric is there, and it just gave me the definitions of Afrocentric and Eurocentric. And I was like, Google, you understand if somebody types in what's the song, da da do do da da, and you can find the song, but you cannot tell me if there's any other centric philosophies that are not Eurocentric or Afrocentric. That's very interesting. So I hope to keep on covering that with the guests that we'll have to talk about it.
That's interesting. I feel like Africa and Europe are like kind of the only continents that are like monoracial. Like North America, South America, I guess like the Americas, like are
Africa, kind of.
Yeah,
'cause there's the Arabs. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Who there's a whole debates and they're like, we're not African.
This is why I want to be clear, because I don't want people coming into the thing being like, don't claim us as being black just because we're on the continent, because I know y'all.
I'm on the other side. It was monoracial.
Okay.
And then Asia and then like the Americas too are like a little more I don't say like not monoracial. And so I wonder if like Eurocentric and Afrocentric exist due to like the monoracial nature of the continent. Obviously, versus like, because you can't say like Asia-centric, because it's like, is that like Indo-centric? Is that like Chinese-centric? Like there's like all the different like races, colonial races created. So and then different cultures within that. So I wonder if that's why.
Fair.
Exist.
Yeah. It's also very interesting to me, like this racial construct is like, it really doesn't make sense, because like half of maybe like 2/3 of the races are races and the other thirds are geography. How can I be black but another person be Chinese?
Slavery.
Huh?
Slavery.
That doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Because I'm African then, or I'm South African then. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Caucasian, black, Chinese, Indian. That's a location.
Yeah.
That's a geography. You know?
Which is why I asked at the beginning if there's a difference between black and African. Because I feel like there is, in that there is like the blackness of race as a concept, and how like diasporic people will be like black and not African. And I feel like there is something about the word black that like roots us in a no place, a people with no land kind of vibe, versus like African, which is a place. So I feel like there's that.
I see what you're saying.
Differentiation of black and African. So like here, you're black because of, colonialism, race constructs, the construct of the whole country being based on race.
Yeah.
And even though like you know where you come from and you can return to South Africa. And so that's why you can also be African, having that land to return to and knowing where you return to.
And I think that's what makes South Africa so unique, is because that race play was in South Africa, right? Because we have black people, we have colored people, and we have white people, right? And then obviously other folks as well. But that race play was there for us as well, in as much as it was in the Americas, So being black was something that we knew we were, Mundomyama, you're a black person. And so it's very interesting when you say that the word black kind of is a no land tie to it, almost just like floaty thing. Whereas to be black in South Africa was still to be South African, and to still have that connection as well, even though you identify as black. But I feel you. I feel you.
Because at the end of the day, it's about the power and where you sit on the spectrum of power, and black is the bottom and white is the top.
Yeah.
And so the categorization is important, especially I guess because like they are not from South Africa.
No.
So they can't call you South African. That gives you too much power. You're black, and so in a way it still strips you of power and locale.
And then they call themselves Afrikaans.
And then they call themselves South Africans, exactly.
Yeah, and they're like, oh yeah, we're Afrikaans. No, you're not.
Yeah.
But let's not go on that rant. If you want to hear that rant, go to the earlier episodes. I think I ranted for like 20 minutes on one of the episodes, just like, stop being weird. But let us know for you, does Pan-Africanism feel relevant to your life? Is it something that is it an ideology that you hold, an ideology that you also like espouse, like you share with people you talk about, and are you Afrocentric or Eurocentric or other centrisms? What is your center? What is your center? What is your focus? Where is your influence? Where does finding things beautiful, what informs the beauty And yeah, awesome. This was a pretty cool game.
Yeah, episode.
This was a pretty cool episode. This was a pretty cool game. Because in my head, I'm like, oh, I want to play a game. Yeah, I want to play that game. How did you know?
I felt it.
You knew it.
Yeah.
But this was a pretty dope episode. I look forward to having guests or even like just snippets of interviews or whatever, and hearing what other people think, and to hear what you think as we keep discussing this and as you keep doing your own research and thinking about whether or not that applies to you and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you for bringing this topic forward. Let's play a game.
Okay, let's play a game. We're gonna play that game. Marshmallow, check it out. Woo!
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I also had to remind myself what it was. Okay, so remembering here the game, we're gonna be tapping like this. I know I just kind of feel like doing this, but we don't do that. So you're just gonna be tapping like this, and then we're gonna say marshmallow, check it out, and woo, and we're gonna try to get to 10.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. 1 marshmallow.
Check it out.
Woo!
2 marshmallow.
2 marshmallow.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Woo! Woo! 3 marshmallow.
3 marshmallow.
3 marshmallow.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Woo! Woo! Woo!
4 marshmallow.
4 marshmallow.
4 marshmallow.
4 marshmallow.
4 marshmallow.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Woo! 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 5 marshmallow.
5 marshmallow.
5 marshmallow.
5 marshmallow.
5 marshmallow.
5 marshmallow.
Check it out.
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 Woo!
Woo! Woo! Woo! Woo! Woo!
6 marshmallow.
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 Check it out.
Check. No, you were supposed to say another
I was
one.
supposed to say another one?
Because I said, did you start the 6?
Yes.
Did I start the 6? 6 marshmallows.
Maybe 6
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
'Twas I, the fool. Wow.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll try again in a couple other episodes.
Yes.
But, sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed listening, please feel free to follow and listen where you can find your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, all the podcast places, and also follow us on YouTube, subscribe, send it to your friends, be like, yo, these people are so lit, let's just like chit chat and listen, it's like smoke a joint at the beach, listen to us talk. Yeah, anywho, such your reviews, 5 stars goes a long way, we love to see it, and if you didn't have fun, just like keep it to yourself.
All right. Bye.
Bye.